Hello, Facebook. Thank you guys for stopping by. We are in the house, not in the shop, because it was pouring rain and the shop has a metal roof, and so it was super loud. So, if you've watched my Facebook Live videos before, you know who I am. Hopefully, if you are a holster maker, hello, Clark. If you're a holster maker, you know who this guy is. This is John Hauptman of PHLster Holsters in Philadelphia.
Greetings.
And
pulling up here we go.
He's pulling up the live feed right now so he can see your questions. Weird. It's like two things happening, the same thing happening at two different times. He's been out at my shop the past couple days. We've been working on some stuff because I am his OEM supplier for a lot of his parts and mold design. And it's been really fun to have him in the shop. And
it's been great. I mean,
as far as I can tell, he's having a good time too because I got fun machines to run. And as is usual, we'll be starting off with a tool tip. So, John, this is a tool we get questions about all the time. What is it?
All the time. Anytime that I do like a brief broadcast from my shop or post pictures or post a video of the process, people ask me about the buffing wheel that I'm using. Back in the day, when all the holsters were 100% by hand and there was like a multi-step process which involved belt sanding and then the sisal wheel and then cotton buffing wheels with buffing compound to get a gloss finish. But now as the process changes, we've been doing more expedient, clean matte finishes, and it's always a challenge to get a smooth matte finish on the plastic surface. So we've been using aluminum oxide flap wheels. We've got one out of the package, two different brands, but they both do.
I purchased mine from HolsterLife.com. So you can see there, I guess that's reversed. John gets his from Grobet.
Yeah.
Put it up to the camera so I can see that label, even though it's going to be
I get these
backwards. We'll post photos of both these wheels after the feed on my page and on John's.
There are a lot of jewelry stores and jewelry supply stores in close proximity to my workshop, so I picked these up in person, but they're available online, and you can get them directly from the source at Grobet, and they're an American company. And
yeah, I'm in the middle of no place. There's no jewelry stores near me, so I buy mine from Stuller.com.
It's great, and if you've got if your parts are coming off of a machine and don't have a lot of aggressive tool marks, this flap wheel straight to the part cleans the edge up. And if you do have some aggressive tool marks, all you need is just a variable wheel, and you can have your sisal wheel on one side and the flap wheel on the other, and you go right from one to the other. And I per skeleton holster, I don't think I spend more than 90 seconds buffing each one maximum, and that's if each one has aggressive tool marks, which is hardly ever the case. So,
but when it is, it's my fault.
But yeah, it's a great value. So far,
hello, Will Silk.
So far, if you're concerned about the perception of quality in terms of whether or not customer expectation is going to be that a matte edge is not premium, so far. No one has mentioned to me, boy, am I disappointed in your holster, the edge was not glossy. It's clean, regular, uniform, smooth, and it looks like a finished product. It never looks incomplete or unfinished or lazy.
As long as it's consistent, where I've seen problems, where I knew I had problems in my earlier holsters, and where I've seen problems in holsters from other younger or less experienced companies who don't have everything quite dialed in yet, is that parts of the holster that are easy to get to, you know, down below dust cover, right by the muzzle, those parts are well polished, but more difficult sections where there are internal curves or corners, you can visibly see that little attention was paid to maintaining an even edge in those spots. These wheels are great if you really lean into the wheel. These will eat some plastic though, so you have to be careful and have a light touch to not avoid reshaping your part unnecessarily.
Additionally, if you're not careful about your part orientation during the buffing, so for example, if you're doing like a pancake holster and you have a lot of long straight edges, it's really important to approach the wheel at an angle such that you're not aggressively grooving the wheel, because these wheels aren't extremely durable. So for example, when I'm really on the move, if I've got a box full of
Hello, Jefferson.
if I've got a box full of 100 holsters that I'm going through, I can, if I'm feeling fresh and really getting into it and trying to be as fast as I possibly can with the part, I'll groove the wheel and I'll blow through a wheel every 100 holsters or so. But the upside is that the speed at which that occurs
pays for the new wheel easily.
Easily. If I'm doing 100 holsters in 90 minutes, maybe 120 minutes.
Hi, Mike. Hello, Tim.
Killing a $15 wheel, it's
the cost of doing business.
It's nothing. It's so worth it. Even if I only got 50 holsters, when I really crank, when I dial the machine all the way up, when I dial the speed all the way up, and I go really heavy-handed to just mindlessly blast through the holsters, and I kill one of these in an hour.
Still worth it.
Oh yeah. Then I just spend the rest of my day doing whatever I want. They're totally worth it. I mean, a cotton buffing wheel used to last me months at a time.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got a wheel comb and you can refresh it and clean the buffing grit out of it and make sure it's not all matted down. Those would last forever, and I got used to changing mine every couple months. But I keep a stack of these in the shop, and I'll be as careless as I want with these because they're just so efficient. It's like you reach a point where, and some of you guys have experienced this with vacuum forming, where you go, oh, well, I used to, take a 2x4 sheet of Kydex and cut it down into 6x8 pieces and get a maximum number of like taco holsters per sheet. And you realize that the more vacuum forming you do, the harder it is to nest the parts that tightly, and you wind up using more sheet material per holster, and you waste a lot in scrap. But once you're at that point, time is the most valuable thing you have in your shop. The time of your employees is the most valuable thing you have in your shop. The time of your yourself is the most valuable thing in your shop. So if you get 30-40% more scrap or waste, but you're accelerating the number of holsters you make, I mean,
saying it comes out in the wash doesn't begin to cover it. If you can get more units done in the end of each workday, the sales of those
you're ahead
units
of the game.
Easily cover the cost of the Plastic Plus. Gabe, you asked what kind of wheel it is. His is from Grobet, mine from Stuller, aluminum oxide flap wheel, basically the same thing. We'll post a picture of these so you guys can see more of the details printed on the labels after the show. I didn't lead off with this, but I usually do. If you are a holster maker and you're here watching the feed, please post your company name and the city or town that you operate out of, just so it's easy for us to keep track of who's who and who we're talking to. We had a couple of questions that got asked. We solicited some questions on Instagram and asked people to let us know what they wanted us to talk about. I just caught one just before I opened up the show tonight from Jefferson Brooks, and he asked a question about vacuum forming versus die molding. So a quick explanation of die molding. Die molding is basically using a matched male and female mold that interlock with the thickness of your sheet of plastic machined out in between them. It's essentially an injection mold, but you're not injection molding anything. It's just two plates that nest together. Instead of using vacuum force or a membrane or foam, you're using a hard mold on the top to force the Kydex down into shape. The advantage of die molding versus vacuum forming: die molding is more precise, it's more consistent. You can do certain kinds of shapes and certain kinds of details in geometry with die molding that you can't execute effectively with vacuum forming. The trade-off is the molds are much harder to make, and typically the costs are much more expensive to get rolling doing die molding. But you can build very basic die molds for very simple things just by hand. If you wanted to make a die mold for a magazine, you would just make a basic mold board with your magazine slug on it, and then build a negative that would nest around that and force the Kydex down around it. I know a number of guys are already doing this for magazines. I do CNC machine die molds for PHLster's mag carriers. I don't do it for holsters currently. I know some shops that do. It's very effective technology, but it's a lot pickier about tolerance, and it's very picky about mold alignment. If your male and female halves are even slightly misaligned, the holster is toast.
You scrap the part, or
you damage the mold.
Right.
Which is even less fun. Hello, Shane. Hello, Shane. Several Shanes.
So, some of you guys will remember the bad old days of making your own belt loops. that was a primitive kind of die forming where you use a couple blocks of wood to make an impression into the plastic. And there was a little while when we were doing universal magazine carriers prior to vacuum forming, where we had a male molding buck for the magazine, and we did a rudimentary die form by cutting out a chunk of the foam in the press in order to get a crisp, defined area. And so we would cut out a block of the foam, press the plastic into it, and then wrap the plastic over the back to get a crisp, square universal magazine carrier out of the foam press process. And that was quickly replaced by vacuum forming.
I did similar hybrid things with my presses a long time ago, where I would have multiple layers of foam with a relief pocket the size and shape of my gun cut in one layer. I even played with different kinds of plywood and MDF inserts to create tight definition around the outline of the gun. In a lot of cases, because the alignment wasn't precise, it was way more hassle than it was worth, and the results never really measured up.
The original formation of the PHLster Access was a combination of foam and die forming, where in order to get the draft around the trigger guard and under the dust cover, we had a blue gun which we had mocked up, drilled a number of holes through, and had locating pins through the blue gun in order to keep it precisely oriented in the foam press every time. And then we had a die insert in order to achieve the tight definition around the trigger guard and the dust cover, so that wouldn't have to be a post process. So we wouldn't have to take it out, reheat, and then clamp in that area again.
And some guys have done that. I've seen holsters done with it.
I can't believe we did that for so long.
There are a lot of things we did that I can't believe we did. I've seen some guys, and this was more commonly, I saw pictures of this back on Cadex Pro back in the day, where guys were making tacos in a coffee bun press and then reheating under the dust cover in post and using little clamps and blocks and things to tighten up the definition under the trigger guard.
My dad's here.
Hey, welcome. Those are all ways that work, but they're just not time effective. And as I've built my business, I have tended to be much more willing to waste time than to waste dollars out of the bank account. And that's a false dichotomy. The idea that
because that's time you could have been making money.
Right. The time that I spend is an opportunity cost. It's time that I'm not using making product, fixing my web store, marketing on social media, answering customer service emails, prepping packaging, printing labels, sitting down and doing CAD or CAM. Any bit of time that I waste on an inefficient process is time that I lose that I could be using to make progress in the business. And it just doesn't make sense.
And you don't get it back. You never get the time back. You can always get the money back. You can always hustle a little bit harder. You can always do something else that's creative. You can always find some alternative source. But the years that I spent wasting time are gone. Those are years that I was not making the progress that I wanted to be making. And there's no recouping that. I mean, we're trying.
The only game plan you don't recoup the time, but you can aggressively make use of the time that you still have and make use of the processes you still have in your shop and really pursue tightening them up. I'm used to working alone. I had John wandering around my shop and going, "Why is this over here? You walk back and forth between this laptop and that computer a lot. Like, your CNC machine's over there, but your email computer's way over here. Are you stupid?" And I was thinking, you know what? I am stupid.
This is a good segue into the next thing that I want to talk about. And past,
it is, Jace. Totally.
In the past, I've had a number of people visit my shop. Either people who wanted to stop by and say hello, people who wanted to come by and learn something, students, other makers, people who have filled in. I remember Lou at CRT Gear stopped by and helped out when I was shorthanded, and it always at least appeared to me from my perspective that the idea of visiting someone else's shop and spending some time with them would be really appealing. And a lot of us are single-person shops. We're started off as single-person shops and then hired in people and taught them as students how to do this work. If you have the opportunity to go to a peer's shop and spend time with them, It is one of the most enlightening, educational, inspirational things that you can do. First of all, it allows you to compare your process and compare your notes and see if you're on the right track and pick up some new ideas. And it's also good for them because you can deliver a fresh set of eyes
to their process.
Right? Like, I never notice how messy my house is until it's time for guests to come over. And then you realize, oh, I'm a terrible adult. There are dust bunnies the size of my dog hiding places that I just, you don't see things when they happen to you slowly over periods of time. And you get acclimated to certain patterns of behavior, and you get comfortable with the way things are, and you live with your own inefficiencies because sometimes it feels easier to deal with the inefficiency than it does to stop what you're doing and clean it up or fix it. And having a fresh set of eyes in your shop helps you out, and being that fresh set of eyes helps you reflect a lot.
And you'll just see things you've never seen before. Like, you'll see little jigs, you'll see tools, you'll see a way of organizing and moving parts around the shop. You'll see all kinds of things you never would have thought to ask for, that they never would have featured in a social media post, the kinds of things that if you have a shop, you have a process, you know what you're doing, and you walk in somebody else's space, stuff just leaps out at you. You're like, what is that? I've never seen that before. And you may find that they have some great options that you want to pursue, or they may not have any that are useful to you because you may make different things or have a different style of working. But it's totally a valuable experience, which leads me to, I'm having kind of an open house tomorrow here at my shop, Henry Holsters. If you are a holster maker and you're within driving distance of Bloomington, Indiana, and you would like to swing by tomorrow and hang out and visit with me and John and see my shop, send me a text message. My phone number is 812-369-2266. And let me know when you plan to come by. I'll get you the address. We'd love to have you come by. We're going to be hanging out, playing in the shop, running some machines, probably eating some food. Feel free to bring some beer by and just relax, listen to some music. Be all reggae all day, right? All reggae all day.
That's the positive vibes.
That's the plan.
That keep the workflow flowing.
So I'm having an open house tomorrow. If you want to come by, let me know. What were some of the other questions we had?
Someone had a question about, someone commented on my Instagram a number of days ago about how do you know when it's...
What's the basic cost to get involved in making...
what's it cost to get involved in doing volume of holsters?
And part of that question is a little bit difficult to answer until you have a little bit more detail about what kind of holsters they're making and what they mean by volume. Like, to me, volume is hundreds of identical units at a time. Like, 20 holsters of one type is not, for a lot of small shops, that's volume. For my shop, 20 of something is not volume, relatively speaking.
I'd say 200 orders a month. 200 orders a month or several dealer orders a month is volume.
Sean, I'll quickly hop on your question. You asked how long it is working part-time before you went full-time. For me, it took 7 years. I started my company in 2008, and I only went full-time this past spring.
I approached it differently.
Hello, Tony.
I was at a job that I wasn't especially committed to, and I didn't really have a whole lot of obligations, and once I saw the holster income beginning to eclipse my day job income, I just rolled the dice and went with it.
Switched horses midstream.
But that's not necessarily the wisest choice, and I'm not going to recommend that to everybody because that's a great way to really screw your life up if you do it wrong. And I spent a lot of years kind of fumbling through the weeds at this, just sort of going on the momentum of it, but,
If I were one of you guys now, with the wealth of information and of resources, of hardware, belt loops, multiple suppliers for plastic, a bunch of different vacuum formers on the market, lots and lots of guys have been using a whole variety of heat presses. There's good, relevant, recent feedback on all kinds of equipment in this field. There are far fewer risks for you to take in terms of spending your money on equipment right now than there were 5 years ago. 5 years ago, nobody was using heat presses. None of these small shops were using vacuum formers. None of the small shops that I knew were using CNC 5 years ago. All those were big unknowns. A lot of guys are sort of filling in that area, and it's becoming a known quantity.
The number of custom and semi-custom mold options out there for high-quality precision vacuum forming, especially if you get something that comes with some trim jigs that allow you to trim the parts faster. If I were getting into this now, I would spend a little bit of time learning how to do these manually, get the fundamentals of what makes a good holster down, buy a few other people's holsters, and see what works.
That's you, Levi. Buy somebody else's holsters and see what quality actually looks like.
And get familiar with it enough that you feel confident enough to discuss the product and know what makes a holster good and what makes a holster less than optimal. And in today's day and age, for someone who's working part-time, and the speed at which you can make 5 or 10 holsters in an evening, just as a single person with like a swift press membraneless former style vacuum former, and a heat press in a relatively small workshop, you can put together 5 or 10 basic holsters for popular models, get them in inventory, and then do things like open a little Amazon web store or start going to gun shows and having identifiably crisp, clean, quality, well-fitting holsters ready to go. 'Cause instead of slaving over something that winds up looking like a melted blob and trying to pass it off at a gun show like you know what you're doing.
Hello, Jared.
So the level of quality which is immediately available to even a small shop,
unprecedented, unheard of.
It's
3 to 5 years ago.
unprecedented, and as far as I'm concerned, it's inexcusable to be charging people money for anything less. If you're going to do this right, when we started off, it was all a time investment up front of learning how to get it done, brute force figuring the process out. I mean, I remember.
How many times did you go to gun stores with a holster you didn't have real steel for to test fit something at the counter? I've done that many, many times. I couldn't afford the guns. I had the blue guns. I made a holster. It fit the blue gun okay. I ended up driving to my local gun store and test fitting at their counter. And then you get there and you're like, wow, it doesn't fit.
Which leads me to
a lot of time wasted.
A question which occurred further up from Michael Jones. How do you acquire custom blue guns for a pistol that may not be popular?
You don't.
The best advice that I can give you is only make holsters which you can reliably and consistently test fit with a real gun. A holster which you've sent out based off of a blue gun is not test fit.
It's test guessed.
You are rolling the dice. I have seen holsters from companies
that should know better.
That should absolutely know better, and who I've had conversations with about presumably knowing better, which do not fit the real gun. There's no excuse for that. Those were the mistakes that we made back in 2008 and 2009 and 2010. Blue guns are not accurate. And frankly, even if you've got a great mold and you're folding it over a replica, you got to be able to...
Real steel tells the truth.
It does. And that's the difference between it rubbing and grinding. Because even if you're test fitting it with a blue gun, if it's like a SIG or a 1911, there are going to be sharp parts on that gun which feel dramatically and substantially and significantly different.
Once those little sharp parts are steel.
Yes. So, honestly, you should own a few Glocks and make holsters for Glocks. They're 95% of the market. Easily. I've stayed in business for the past year offering basically one model of Glock holster. That should be a clue. And we're talking hundreds of units a month of a relatively niche market Glock holster. If you show up at a gun show with 25 Glock holsters and they're all priced relative to that specific gun show audience, you're going to sell them. If you've got... I wouldn't wouldn't waste your money on pursuing too many different varieties unless you're willing to commit to an arsenal of guns. And
That's you, Tony Katner.
Right. I mean, that's a very big name move to make. So, yeah.
One other point I've made about that, though, and talking with guys like Shane from Smoky Mountain Concealment, is that you can make a very effective strategic play to focus on a couple of guns that are less commonly available from most holster makers if you plan to aggressively market that holster, that availability, as a way to get more people in the front door of your web store, to pay attention to hashtags on social media. You know, there are certain guns that don't get widely adopted, but get adopted enough that there's a legitimate demand for holsters.
Bursa, CZ,
Car.
H&K, Car.
You know, or maybe you decide to be a guy who specializes in revolvers. Guess what? People do carry those. You could make a viable company offering from a core stable of revolvers.
Yeah, if you were if you made the best K-frame revolver holster out there, you'd clean up.
Yeah, Kyle, you haven't afforded your SIG empire yet. You don't have. This is the thing. You don't have to go all the way all at once. Even if you decided you wanted to get into SIGs, if I was going to get into SIGs, I would start with 938, 238, 320, and 320C. I'd start with those four, and I'd get good at those. And I'd get as many holsters out there as I could for those. And then gradually reinvest the profits. I'd get a priority list. I'd keep track of what people were asking for by email. I'd talk to some other holster makers and ask, when you get requests for SIGs, what do you get requests for? And if you do get requests for SIGs and you don't want to do them, would you consider referring business to me on these models? Like, guys, network. We're holster makers. There's not, it's not a zero-sum game when we're talking about a one-to-one, person-by-person, business-to-business basis. There's a lot of upside. Our products overlap hardly at all. And so you can do tons.
And if you were really slick, you would find out all the differences between the SIG, all the various weird variations of like 226 and 229, like the Elite and the Legion and the old West German ones, and all the different generations and ways that they change it. And you'd sit down with a set of calipers and a micrometer, find out what all those differences are, and then make one holster that fits most of them really, really well. Because nowadays you can sit down with someone like Andrew, who's a CAD wizard, with a model of the SIG and all of the measurements, and go through and regularize the differences such that you can offer a comprehensive solution for something like that, which is going to save you a lot of money in terms of your overall mold investment, which makes your pursuit of market domination a lot easier. So you can reduce the number of SKUs that you need to stock and accommodate the widest variety of holsters, especially to the customers who are SIG fanatics who may own multiple different versions of the same SIG and are frustrated with the way one holster might not necessarily fit all of them with the precision that they prefer.
So that is a significant undertaking. A lot of time, decent bit of money, and you got to be careful and precise. It's not for everybody, but it could be for you. So one very basic thing, no matter what you're making, no matter which models you offer, no matter what style you're making, network with other holster makers who make products different than yours, and build good relationships there. Refer business to them for things that are a better fit for their line than for what you offer, and then get referrals from them for things that fit your line that they don't offer. There's no downside to you for passing on an order that doesn't fit your current shop and offerings well to a shop that it is a good match for. That makes the customer happy, it makes that shop happy, and it gets you out from under having to make something that you wouldn't do well and wouldn't enjoy making. Don't make stuff you don't want to make.
It only damages your brand. If you're stuck doing things that aren't your strength, aren't your focus, because as soon as you make one thing, you're going to get questions for it. I still get questions about the Yoda holster. And and that's from 2012.
Yep.
And it'll never end. I still get questions about an iPhone case that I made as a joke because it's on YouTube. I get questions about things that I showed in videos back in 2011, which I had done with a heat gun. Right? People want that.
Once it's on the internet, it's there forever, and you will hear about it. So for a while, before I completely stopped doing custom stuff, I had a no social media pictures of any kind policy. Anytime I had somebody come into the shop and I made something custom for them, I very politely but firmly explained that I did not want pictures of it on social media, because what inevitably happened is I'd get an email from some dude in Texas or from some dude in Oregon or some guy in Alaska. And he's like, hey, I saw you made a holster for so-and-so. Can you make a holster for mine? I've got the same thing. I'm like, well, if you want to fly down here from Alaska, I guess.
Right, and then you get a bad reputation for telling people no. They get offended, they get upset, they think that you don't care about them or don't want their business, when in fact it's just a matter of economy, efficiency, and quality that you have to turn that job down. And people take it personally, unfortunately. I've had to, I can tell in the email reply that the person's feelings are hurt, and they might not then proceed to buy something else that I offer.
Yeah.
So
you don't do the customer any favors by setting them up to fail by publicizing a thing you don't intend to actually make available generally. So just avoid that. Michael Jones, somebody earlier asked for the quick rundown on equipment that you would need to start making holsters as a hobby and transition into a more serious business. So here's the quick rundown, my top things. I would say skip the toaster oven and get a heat press. Probably 15 by 15 is good to start. If you are working with something like the small DIY Pro Press or a coffee bomb, you're doing one at a time, a 15 by 15 heat press is fine. You'll want a decent press that matches well with whatever style of holsters it is that you're making. If you're planning to do a lot of tacos, you can go all manual and get a coffee bun press. They make just fine holsters. If you want to get into vacuum forming, understand that you're going to have to then get a vacuum pump, you're going to have to get a vacuum former, and you're going to need to get into split molds, which means you'll also need separate molds for folding, and you'll need guns for test fitting. So if you want to do it really just as a hobby, I would say get a coffee bun press, learn to make tacos, and then gradually branch out. Once you're ready to make the leap into vacuum forming, decide what core products you want to make. Are you going to make tacos? Are you going to make outside the waistbands? Are you going to do light bearing or not? And then ask other holster makers who make the kind of thing you want to make, and ask them what presses they use and what they find to be the best and worst features of using that press to make that style of holster. There is tons of info out there if you'll ask for it.
I'm going to say something that doesn't get said very often. I'm willing to bet that very few people are further than 2 hours drive from anyone who's making holsters, right? Everyone is within at least a minimum of a 2-hour radius of someone else who's making holsters. It's pretty common. If you haven't started making holsters yet, I'm willing to bet that that person who's within your local area needs some help. And if you're willing to work hard for them, or maybe discuss some sort of agreement in which you don't directly compete with them, or you agree to help them for some period of time before you go out on your own, considering how much most holster makers learn from the free information that's out there, considering how much they likely owe some small debt to the free information that exists on the forums and in videos, to how much they owe to where they are to the information that they've been granted, they should be willing to teach you something. They should be willing to pay it forward, and at least in exchange for free help around their shop.
You know what my shop could always use? A good cleaning. If there's a holster maker near you and you want to go see him and ask him a bunch of questions and take up an hour or two of his time, guess what you could do in return? Clean the whole shop. Show up with a good shop vac and spend a couple hours there cleaning up everything. Help him organize, take some work off his plate, and he'll be grateful. You can get good information, helpful stuff from him.
Right. You got to. There's not yet a serious culture of studentship and apprenticeship in this. A lot of guys jump into it on their own and by themselves, and sort of singularly put their mind to it and toil away,
hack their way through,
in solitude, it's entirely possible to find someone who needs some kind of help and offer it in exchange. And considering how valuable it is to teach other people, how much you learn from teaching, people should be interested in testing their own chops to see if they can reproduce a student. So it's good for the teacher, it's good for the student, and you're going to get a lot out of learning directly from someone and being in their shop and seeing their process and getting exposed to it bit by bit. So instead of, if I had to make the recommendation to someone who was interested in getting involved in making holsters, and they say, what do I need to do to start off? Find someone who's making holsters and go work for them for 3 months, 6 months, or a year, and maybe even after that point, after that year of you working for them, maybe instead of it being something that you want to pursue on your own, maybe you've just created a more powerful prospect by working with them, right? So maybe you don't necessarily need to do all the investment of jumping out on your own. Maybe it pays a little bit more to get involved with someone who's already doing it and build that relationship and maybe work for them and then work with them after that. Especially if you're a smaller shop, because then that really magnifies what you're capable of.
The flip side is you got to be honest. If you intend to go into business for yourself and you're wanting to work for somebody else for a period of time as a learning experience, be upfront about what you're hoping to do. I know a number of holster makers who have had guys into their shop who worked for a time and were dishonest about what their long-term plans were and did their best to extract the maximum value and information from the shop they were currently working for, and then went out locally and decided to try to directly market at product, at price, at customer base against the person they had just been working for. Don't do that.
That should rightfully get the locks to your shop super glued shut. Like that kind of thing is revenge worthy, and you should avoid doing it, and you should be clear. You might even want to consider signing something. I have some friends who do tattooing, and they take on apprentices very rarely. And I know one guy who makes his apprentice sign something that says, for 4 years after I teach you how to do this, you work for me in my shop, and if you don't, you got to leave the state or I'm going to come get you, right? Like, and it's serious. Like, when you teach somebody a trade and you teach them a craft, you're giving them a gift.
You're investing in them.
You're jumping them into making holsters. You're giving them the gift of this opportunity. You meet cool people doing it. It's a satisfying craft, you know?
So,
oh yeah, glue lock. I said glue locks because I didn't want to say hit your hands with a ball peen hammer. Because we can't endorse that. That's really dangerous, and I would never do that to anybody.
That's funny, Ben. John's videos led you to me. Interesting. So one of the other topics we mentioned, which I wanted to bring up tonight, is the concept of collaboration. And what we've just been talking about is more of an unequal relationship where somebody who's inexperienced, a novice, beginning, pairs up with and works for and learns from somebody older, somebody more experienced, somebody who's got a more developed business, a more refined process. But once you get to a level where you are a legit brand, where you've got a well thought out design that's consistently executed, it's not changing week by week depending on your mood, you've got a stable core product line. One of the interesting opportunities that the internet, that social media, that forums and YouTube and videos, all these things make possible is for you to meet and talk to other people that you can then eventually collaborate with. So, about a year ago, John and I have known each other for years, but this is the first time we've met this week. We'd never met in person before this. Even though we had talked many, many, many times and had collaborated on projects and had done design work together and brought things to market together, all kinds of stuff. We'd never met in person until this week. So this has been unbelievably fun for me.
It's been mind-blowing. I mean, I've been talking to Andrew basically every day for a year, either through text or on the phone.
And for a couple of years before that, a couple times a week.
It's I knew that it was going to be an exciting, valuable time, but I'm definitely not prepared for how much it completely exceeded my expectations.
And one of the advantages of technology, the fact you can get in a FaceTime call with another holster maker, and like you can show him what you're doing in real time on the bench and be talking about it. That's unbelievable. But even more incredible, like yesterday we were working on prototyping a new part, and we went through three iterations with physical machine copies off my mill in a little under 2 hours. It's unbelievable.
That's
the
a
turnaround
month.
time.
That's a month's worth of work if you're corresponding. If you're writing back and forth, if you're mailing things back and forth, if you're mailing something out and then doing some revisions in your own shop and trying to like squeeze that testing time in between production time. I mean, you guys know it takes a while to develop something and a while to tweak it and get it right, especially if you're working with. Okay, so I've had a number of opportunities to do things in other circumstances where I work with people who aren't necessarily familiar with making holsters, and aren't necessarily familiar with the process for making holsters, and haven't worked with anybody like that in the past. And even when you're working with them kind of directly, it's a huge hurdle to overcome the communications. And,
it's not a communication
and
barrier. It's just a lack of common experience and a lack of sometimes vocabulary, but just like sense. If you try to explain to somebody, if you try to put into words how a well-formed holster should feel, it's difficult to quantify. If you haven't experienced it, you haven't experienced it. It's just hard to get across.
So, I've dealt with some people who are professionals in terms of mold making and vacuum forming who aren't involved in holsters, and this is for other projects, for other people, and trying to coordinate them together to get this done, even directly, is a multiple month process. Like, if they say, "Hey John, how long would it take to get this going?" I'm like, 6 months to a year. Period. For anything. But that's stuff that, you know,
That's working around his current schedule and his current business and his production schedule.
Or just the realistic proposition of getting people who don't necessarily know how to make holsters into making holsters, right? Or dealing with people who aren't familiar with the process, even if they are sophisticated professional vacuum formers and sophisticated mold makers, getting them to appreciate the nuances of the holster is a barrier which will incur a substantial development time. Now, given the fact that a number of us have been doing this for several years and have developed at least a reasonable sophistication in terms of vacuum forming and machining, the potential for encountering another holster maker who has a strength in an area that you might need their help, and then collaborating with them, there is an enormous potential to use that to your advantage and make incredible progress. Like, if you were to find some company near you that does vacuum forming, right? They might do vacuum forming for any number of like commercial products, right?
Recently, I've been talking via Instagram with a guy who's got 25 years of experience running a vacuum forming factory that made large, thick parts like engine enclosures for forklifts. Big stuff.
Right.
It's totally cool, but he doesn't understand my product because he doesn't make my product.
A lot of the people who are involved in vacuum forming, especially like commercial
industrial vacuum
forming, they're making static fixtures. They're making things that bolt together and comprise a relatively stationary enclosure. It'll be a cover for something. It'll be a box for something. It'll be the fascia for something. It'll be a tray or a component that doesn't have to flex and snap and fit and be as dynamic a part as a holster is.
We really have unique design requirements for what we're doing.
Thermoforming plastic to make a holster is completely different from just about, like, I can't think of any other part that gets thermoformed that needs to behave like a holster does.
I'm not sure I can think of any either.
Where else do you get thermoformed sheet that has a male and female fitment criteria? It doesn't happen. So that's we're pushing the envelope of what these thermoform sheet materials are supposed to do. Like,
yeah, if your only job is to protect an engine or protect some component, and you just have to be, at least a half an inch away from the component, but not more than an inch away from the component, like, you've got tons and tons of tolerance. As long as your mounting holes are in the right place, you can put the bolts through and the thing mounts up, you're done.
Right, and I've had discussions with people like, oh, well, how do I keep the sheet from thinning in certain parts? They're like, you don't, it just is. And that's not an acceptable condition in a holster. So,
I think I mentioned this a week or two ago. I threw away hundreds of units that I made for him off my big vacuum former because I had failed to anticipate some design challenges, and I ended up with a whole bunch of holsters that had thinned in a few critical areas, and I did not discover it until post-form, post-rough trim, and I prepped them for CNC and cut out and drilled about half of them. And they all ended up in the trash can in 1 week.
Now,
Ugh.
Given the specific challenges of making holsters, and given the specific challenge not just of making the physical shell of the holster, but creating a wearable appliance.
That's also comfortable.
Right, a wearable appliance which conceals a deadly weapon is an incredibly complicated endeavor. However, we are in the incredibly lucky position of having reached a critical mass of machining and forming knowledge in this community, such that if you have an idea for something, or you have part of an idea for something, you can reach out to someone who has a comparable level of expertise and leverage that relationship
And get those missing pieces working quickly.
and do really interesting things. So, this leads us into the guts of the discussion of the value of collaboration. And I'd like to take a minute to tell the story of the past 12 to 16 months that I've had.
Do you need to charge your phone? There's an outlet right behind you.
Oh, yeah.
He's keeping an eye on the comments on his phone, but he's running low on juice. So
about a year ago, a little more than a year ago, after several occasions during which I had the opportunity to, I had my CNC router and it was occupied doing things, and I didn't have the chance to take it offline to do a quick job. I would call up Andrew, and he made initially for me the inside the waistband magazine folding jig, so
Yep.
I could heat up the butterfly mold for the mag carrier, fold it around the thing, put it in the die, and proceed to the next one.
get consistent folds on 8 pieces at a time, like clockwork, and keep cycling through.
And then the turnaround time plus the fact that it was exactly what I wanted without really having to struggle through explaining it to someone who doesn't know the process gave me a great result, like faster than I probably would have been able to get around to it in my own shop. And then after that, we had occasion to collaborate on the flat pack together.
If you guys have not seen the flat pack, it is the most modular, most low-profile, self-adjusting tourniquet carrier on the market. You can put it on your bag, in your backpack, on your belt, on your vest, in your pocket. They're awesome. Snakehound.com.
Yeah, snakehoundmachine.com has them. Also, if you are shameless self-promotion, but we'd like it if you supported us, you can get them at officerstore.com if you're an EMT or a fireman or a police officer. and you would like to maybe get them for your department or agency. But at any rate, so we worked on the flat pack together, and the degree to which that was a success.
My sister's here. Hi, Maureen.
Intersected with a moment when I had reached kind of a bottleneck with my own process. Like, in order to take my products further, I was going to need to basically reinvest in my process in a significant way and overcome some of the limitations of what we were capable of in terms of our own CNC knowledge and capacity, and then get a better former, and then get a better machine. And it was just looking down the barrel of, like, I might not make it. You know, I thought seriously about whether or not I was going to be able to get it together to make that transition.
If you climb the cliff once, climbing the cliff a second time is just scary, demoralizing sometimes.
And I saw what Andrew was doing, and I asked him if he would be interested in working with me to redevelop all of my products and really seriously take advantage of the precision of his process in order to upgrade them into the next generation of product and increase the efficiency of how they were made. And what you guys have seen over the past year is the release of the Gen 2 skeleton, the injection molded flat pack, the new TDI sheath, and the inside the waistband magazine carrier.
Ben Miller asked, John, how did you find Andrew initially? I think actually the initial contact was I reached out to him a long time ago when I was shopping, when I was comparing materials for my inside the waistband soft loops.
Oh, yeah.
He had just started selling those glossy inch-wide ones.
They were the only ones I could find at the time.
Some weird webbing from some company in Indy. And I reached out to him and asked him some questions about it, just hoping that he'd be willing to share the info. And even though, I think at that point you hadn't even heard of me, I was pretty much under the radar for the first 5 years.
Well, I knew who you were because I had heard about you through Jeff Bluevman.
Oh, okay.
So I thought that you were like making hybrid holsters at the time.
I was making hybrid holsters at the time. It had been my goal when I started my company to become known for making the most robust, overbuilt fighting hybrid holster. And I think I succeeded generally, but in terms of doctrine about self-defense and effective carry, I pivoted very hard in the direction of appendix carry. And once that happened, investing further time and energy in developing a more comprehensive hybrid line, when I no longer considered it the optimal mode of carry that I'd recommend, did not seem like a good investment to me. But I reached out to John over a hardware question, because in the battle days, like, you saw a picture of, like, somebody had the loop you wanted, or somebody had a black oxide steel screw post with a slotted back. It was the holy grail.
Unobtainium. You know what took forever to get? Oval head screws.
Yeah, see, I short-circuited that problem by going straight to flathead screws, which were easily available, and sourcing finish washers.
Ah, yeah. See, I always really wanted those oval head screws, and it took DIY holster stocking them for me to really get them all the time.
I had a really weird conversation with a guy in California, of all places, who ran a small machine shop that did custom security fasteners for weird industry stuff, and I was trying to explain what I needed for a screw post. He's like, I think I have something like that, and he sent me a sample pack, and I still remember vividly opening up the envelope that came to my apartment in Bloomington and sitting down at the kitchen table and tearing the bag open and dumping them onto the table and realizing that, yes, this is it. I was like, honey, I called my wife, like, he has the screw post that I want.
Remember when they were when they were from knife kits and they were aluminum?
Oh yeah, I used to get them from my local hardware.
They were trash.
Like,
I was so disappointed with those all the time.
You guys have seen that meme, the and it's gone meme? It's like, okay, it's like, I'm getting ready to thread this and it's gone.
Oh yeah, they would vaporize. They would totally
chuck it and go again. Yeah, Mike, I remember that. Domestic quality stainless steel 18/8 stainless screw posts have never been and will never be cheap.
So, at any rate, getting back to the value of collaboration, being able to talk with Andrew, who had the same kind of experience that I had making holsters, had the same kind of conception of quality, right? The same broad holster philosophy, and had the capacity to execute some of the most challenging ideas that I had, gave me the opportunity to reinvent a clean, simple, unique, coherent, aesthetic, high quality, reasonably priced product line. Basically, I basically started my business from scratch in January of 2016. And it has been the coolest and busiest year I've ever had. Having reduced...
And it's not done yet.
I know, it's still got a couple months. I downsized the shop back to just myself and made the commitment that I was going to go employee-free and slash the overhead and then design the products around production times and quality goals. And being able to collaborate with someone who knows what they're doing and has similar orientations towards the product has been probably the most rewarding creative experience of my life. And I would recommend it to everybody. Now, the concerns that people have. Oh, well, do I have total autonomy over the product? Or am I going to lose my own voice in this product? Am I going to have to make compromises that I'm not happy with? And there are a number of issues like that. And am I going to be able to communicate really well? I mean, these are things that are... What are some of the concerns that we have about collaboration, Andrew?
Some of the concerns are like, is my intellectual property going to remain mine? Will I have security of my own designs and ideas?
Do I have mobility if I need it?
How flexible is this? If there are problems, who's responsible for them? What actually are the terms of the agreement? Who's contributing what? And what is the end goal? There are many legitimate questions that do need to be answered, but it's not, you don't look at somebody else and say, do you want to have a formal collaboration? And the one says, as a matter of fact, yes, I do. A formal collaboration has been exactly what I'm looking for. Like this gradually morphed into a global redesign of John's products, a reimagining of how they would function, how they would look, how they would fit, and how we would produce them. And the things that we've done with his product were not viable options for us 2 years ago. This was not low-hanging fruit that we finally got around to picking. As I got, better with my mill and more confident with CAD and CAM, and was able to develop and execute more complicated and more difficult requirements, new possibilities opened up in front of us.
So, considering that there are a number of problems and questions, like how are we going to get this done? Am I going to be protected?
Can I see your phone from me?
I'm actually not getting any new comments on this.
Oh boy, that's not good.
So, given all there are a number of problems that you could anticipate and pre-contract for, and there are a number of problems that you can't anticipate. So, basically, the way I approach the collaboration is to have a number of principles to which I adhere at any given moment. Now, we can get into those. If you want to have a successful collaboration, there are a couple fundamental things that you're going to need to do. The most primary of those is to have honesty. Your collaboration is not successful when you do things like say, oh yeah, it's great, and it's really not great, because you're concerned about hurting the other person's feelings or damaging their ego, or there's nothing more time wasting than telling somebody that the project is fine when in fact it's not fine, because now you're going to spend time executing the project
When it's bad.
and when it's bad, and then have to spend time in the future fixing it. Being honest is really important. Being receptive to honesty is also very important. If you're not willing to hear about something being a success or a failure, or you're not willing to maybe have your first idea
Shot down
hard. Like, no, that's not possible, or I think that's dangerous, we're not going to do it, right? If you're not, you have to be willing to put your ideas out there and have them disposed of. And you also have to be willing to say the truth about what you think. Now, a number of years ago, when I was in a band, and that's another place where you have these same collaborative problems, the person I was in a band with said that he heard some rule of thumb that 80% of the ideas you have are disposable. If you're going to have 10 ideas, the first 8 of them you're going to throw away before you get to the second best idea and then the best idea that you keep. So it's important to, when you're having a collaboration, you just start talking. If you have an idea, you express it. And you express it without the fear that the other person's going to hurt your feelings, and that person gives you honest feedback. When I'm brainstorming, I'll just start talking, and the things that I say could be ridiculous garbage. And I'm aware of that, and I know that in order to get the ball rolling at all, you need to start somewhere.
Yep.
And where you don't want to start is with your most precious idea that you're the most invested in. Because if you start with your most precious idea, which you're most invested in, then you're only going to get your feelings hurt when the other person who cares about the collaboration offers some suggestions and some alterations to that. So have ideas, have bad ideas, have just trash that you just talk trash and put it all out there, and let it get shot down. Because once you start challenging the ideas and you start asking the questions and you start dealing with these problems, the idea evolves. It's a friend of mine, Stephen Pinot over at M3 Strategies, uses a phrase called steel manning as opposed to straw manning. When you have a straw man, you make a fake representation of someone's argument just to beat it up. But steel manning is when you have your real argument and you try to find the holes in the armor, right? And the more of those holes you find, the more of them you can patch, and the more you can redesign the armor until your concept is sound, right? So it's important to be aggressive in how you examine your own ideas and the ideas of your collaborative partner.
None of us want to invest 100 hours into something
For it
only
to
to
suck.
realize that there was a problem that one of us knew about and was too timid to say, hey, actually, I don't think that's going to work. Okay? Be upfront. If it's a no, give it unequivocally. Don't hedge. It's like the same thing when I was a high school teacher and I had students writing papers for me. If students expect to be able to sit down, blank, and write their final draft, that's not how the world works. You write the first draft so that you can write the second draft, and the third draft, and the fourth draft, and the final paper. Same thing with these concept ideas. You put the idea out so it can get pushed back. So you can push it back out so it can get pushed back. And you can push it back out each time, taking into serious consideration the criticisms, the suggestions, the questions, whatever comes back to you, take it, think about it, adjust, push the idea back out.
The other important thing that goes with that is having a clear criteria for the project, right? So that way you know what you're talking about and you have a frame of reference. I've mentioned this in the past, I think, in brief, but the phrase "think outside the box" I think is probably the worst advice you can give to anybody. It's supposed to encourage a kind of like liberating creativity and sort of like free thinking, you know, think of alternative solutions, when in fact the process of design involves drawing the smallest box you possibly can. If the sky's the limit, then there's no criteria. And if there's no criteria, then you're not actually designing things. And I'm not talking about making something and then justifying all of your decisions post hoc, or looking at it and then rationalizing the mistakes you've made and calling them features. I'm talking about strict, because people do this a lot.
No, yeah. That's not a bug, it's a feature.
Right.
Well, it's really bad. It's a feature.
Right? Or you just throw some bogus lingo at it to make it sound cool. But
Are you beating up on my Superfly cherry pie again? Because that deep, deep, deep concealment with the stud system.
Hey, my concealment's so deep my piece hangs below my knees, yo. But at any rate, you got to draw the box small. The smaller you draw the box, the more obvious the answer becomes. Because if you have a very tightly defined box, then it can only be a certain set of things, right? You need to narrow in and get that precision. So,
this is one of the reasons why universal holsters generally, I think, are a bad idea and fail on most metrics, because the initial design box is so big that it can't effectively fulfill any of the design requirements because they're so widely spread apart.
So let's do you want to let's take one of the things we've worked on as an example and go through the design process. Let's do the mag carrier.
Okay.
Because that involves process redevelopment as well as product reconceptualization. So after we had finished the skeleton, I had some very clear ideas for how long I wanted the products to take to make, what I wanted their cost to be, right? I had an idea of what I wanted to pay for the part, I had an idea of what I wanted to sell the part for, and I had an idea of what I wanted the customer to pay for it. I had an idea of how long that needed to take in order to accomplish, and I had an idea of how it needed to be in terms of the aesthetic as it fit into the rest of the product. So I had a design language which I was using. I was using non-folded two-piece.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Ryan.
Design language.
Yep.
I knew that based on the previous carrier, I wanted to erase the use of excessive hardware. And so what I did, I initially said, can I make a magazine carrier that has no hardware? Period. And I started from there, and the answer was no, it's got to have a belt loop. Okay, so can I make a mag carrier? Is it possible to make a magazine carrier that has one screw? And I said, yeah, it is. You know, I can look around and I can see things like some of the like the G code,
Scorpion line.
those, and as well as things like that inside the waistband folded magazine carrier that they make for like the Incog or what have you, where it folds from the bottom. And I looked at some of those. I made an evaluation of some of the problems that design would have as it relates to my other criteria. You know, I don't want it to fold. It's got to be two pieces. Or it's open on a seam. I don't want it to fall out. Or the shock cord lacing is too complex, and the part itself is unnecessarily complicated. And I said, okay, well, let's strip all this down and simplify it. And we went through a number of iterations to get it there, and we arrived at male and female pins with a simple wrap. And you know, the wrap relates to the design language of the flat pack, and the two-piece design relates to the design language of the skeleton holster, and the pins are an innovation. For which we, after a number of runs, Andrew decided that it was time to experiment with die forming, and we got to this thing. And this isn't the result of, if you could make any magazine carrier in the world, what would it be? Let's just draw it out of our fantasy land. No, we drew the box in an extremely narrow way, defined tightly all of the criteria: production time, production cost,
Assembly time,
number of parts, retail price. All of these things were hard limits, narrow, defined criteria, and the more narrowly we defined it, the more it could really only be a very small handful of solutions. and then the obviousness of that thing in terms of that context. When you make the context very small, the things which fit into it are very obvious. You know, you make it a small box, but a very complicated puzzle piece which can only fit in one certain way, and the thing itself reveals what it's going to be through the criteria that you've set.
This is not necessarily to say that a small box is an instantaneous solution. It is possible to draw the box too small and have design requirements that don't fit any available solution that exists.
Right, you can draw the box so small that it's impossible. At which point, like at first I drew the box so small I said, can I do it with no hardware? No, that's not possible.
Here's looking at you, Remora holsters. So I remember calling up John one night and showing him pictures of a bunch of test pieces I had pulled on the Swift press, where I was tossing around this idea of using matched male and female pins, you know, a boss and a pocket, molded into the kydex so that the shock cord would provide a self-adjusting universal tension that would not be excessive, but would not also allow the mag to fall free. But shock cord doesn't
faces to slip in relationship to
shock cord doesn't align pieces very well. It's too elastic for that. And so finding a way to mold a pair of bosses so the magazine halves are aligned up and down and can't rotate off axis, and to run the shock cord through those so that they're also pinned together and the elastic tension of the enclosure makes sure that the male and female pin are seated together. Like it was a super clean, simple, but interlocked series of features that ended up producing a design that uses two pieces of kydex and a 14-inch length of shock cord that is stupid easy and fast to assemble and provides self-adjusting tension on a magazine. Totally cool.
And one of the major values of the collaboration, not just for the fact that Andrew has the technical capacity to produce the part, is that essentially as I was thinking about it, it was his experience in making holsters and making these parts and dealing with the same considerations that I deal with. He has the ability to basically verbalize
Look at Owen.
and actualize the things that I'm brewing in my head but not yet able to necessarily articulate. And when he showed me the picture, it was probably within minutes of me texting him, like I was about to text him to suggest something like what he was already working on. You know? Like, and that's a valuable part of the relationship. Not that it's necessarily guaranteed, but when you're dealing with someone who has a broadly similar set of experiences, the potential for that rudimentary telepathy exists a little bit better. Where, I mean, I've had long, difficult conversations with people while I'm trying to work with them on things where I draw it and I explain it and I use the limits of my vocabulary to describe what's in my mind, and somehow it turns into an argument, right? Like that's a problem that you get with collaborating with people who
are too far disconnected from your common experience to actually make that transition.
And again, this industry, our field, is rich now with people who have been doing this for more than 5 years and who have been doing it for close to 10 years. Like we're getting past that like 5-year
adolescent
mark.
phase. Yeah.
And as everybody's doing this,
Hello, Rob.
They're all building their various technical capacities, or they're coming from other backgrounds. They're starting to figure out how they can use their background in other industries in order to facilitate the holster making. So,
I'm seeing new comments. You getting them?
the last one I have is from Michael Sedlicek.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're pretty close to current.
And if you have the opportunity to take advantage of that, right? All of us are out here on our own, struggling on our own, when we're reaching the point where some amount of consolidation is inevitable. Either people are going to stop making holsters and go back to what they were doing, or they're going to develop relationships with other creative minds who have other technical capacities, and they're going to grow these little spheres of influence. It's like the way stars get made. You've got a huge nebula full of matter, and eventually they're going to sort of larger, more significant gravitational bodies. And it's important to start thinking about how you, as a business, are going to overcome all the growth challenges and use all of the amazing resources to bypass some of the expensive growing pains and take advantage of the technical capacity and our advantage of each other's creativity and strengths, and we both are using that to move to the next level. And it's important to be aware that you're not operating in isolation. You are out there with other people who are doing cool things. You might have some product overlap. You might not. You might be able to do things like get together and do really cool things with the people who are out there. And don't sleep on that, because it could potentially be very powerful. And also, other big companies might not be doing that. You might have a chance to really get up and surprise some folks.
One of the realities, as a company becomes bigger, they have more capital, they have more equipment, they have more technical expertise. That's a lot of mass. The bigger a company gets, typically, the slower they move to innovate, the slower they move to adapt, the slower they react to new, small opportunities in the market. If you're small, you might think, oh, woe is me, I don't have money, I don't have a CNC, I don't have all these other things the big companies have. What you do have is low overhead, an unbelievably fast and efficient decision-making process. If you are the business, you can make a decision like that about what you want to do, what you want to make, where you want to sell, how you want to work. In big companies, it's never that clean, never that fast. And so you can take advantage of the unique realities of your business and maximize those strengths by using them deliberately, consciously.
And your collaborations don't even have to be permanent. You can work with one person on one thing, another person on another thing. Anymore, when it's time for me to get into developing something else, I think, who would like to get in on this with me, right? The more different ways I have of looking at this, the more innovation I'm going to get. Maybe the idea that I have doesn't involve hard plastic. Maybe I need to go to another expert in another field who may want to be involved in a collaboration, right? Like the opportunities open up in an interesting way where you don't have to in-house invest everything for your business. You can get it made somewhere else. Maybe you can chip in with someone else to get it made. Maybe maybe you want to own it together. Maybe you don't necessarily have all the manufacturing capacity in-house, but you have a portfolio of things that are branded with your company name, or a portfolio of things that you have made and then sell, or a portfolio of things that you make for someone else and they sell. Like, you don't have to do it all yourself, and in fact, doing it all yourself could be the least efficient way to do it, especially as a small business where you don't always have 100% of the resources to get something done. So in that sense, collaboration allows you to flex like a bigger business and do a wider variety of more interesting things and have more sources of income and more eggs in more baskets. On top of the fact that the more open you are to collaboration, the fewer things you need to learn and master yourself.
You can really focus on your strengths and double down on them and make the most out of them. And if you're receptive to collaboration and you're proactive in collaborating, work will find you. If you have chops, if you're good at what you do, obviously, like, it doesn't, if I need a difficult product made, it is not it is not a question of finding the person who's got the most hype, the most sizzle, the most cool factor. If I have a difficult technical challenge that I need executed, I need to find a person who's got the chops to get it done. To get it done quickly, to get it done on budget, to get it done at high quality. If you want to do collaboration, find a way to really hone, to really raise to the highest level possible the things that are unique that you bring to the table, and then find other people who need those.
What's the biggest challenge in terms of growing your business? Sales and exposure. I mean, finding people who don't know about my product and convincing them to buy it. That's the biggest challenge. It used to be manufacturing capacity. I mean, there were.
Then I came in.
There were a couple of years where I felt like I had a huge business because I was busy to the hilt with a backlog and an efficient process. As soon as that was gone, I had the opportunity to say, okay, I can make as many holsters in a week as I used to make in a month with half the number of people. Now it becomes, okay, how do I fill my time
with that? How
do I get to the point where I have to make 50 holsters every day, right? So that becomes the next challenge. So, now that I have more ability to sustain an inventory, now it becomes seeking out dealers. And then it's a matter of, okay, well, how do I go from a company where I had a website and I could just throw holsters in an envelope and send them out to people to something where, like, okay, well, now I need to focus on coherent brand identity and packaging and logos and labeling and
barcodes, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, barcode, UPC codes, and dealer pricing, and negotiating dealer sales, and getting dealers on board, and then developing some more things, and developing a little more different kinds of autonomy, like maybe getting involved in my own hardware, such that I have a totally 100% in every way unique product that I can put on shelves, and
Sam Cummins is here. Hi, Sam Cummins.
See you tomorrow, homie.
And Matt Bills, it is a 3-axis. I did not have the money to buy a 4th axis that to put on my machine. Although, a guy can dream.
So, the challenge has become now, before my challenge was, my time is 100% filled with making a small number of holsters, right? Now my time is not 100% filled with making many times the number of holsters the capacity potential has changed. So now I need to find a way to make this capacity worthwhile. So it's, dealers and sales and exposure, and, I'm not really a natural salesman necessarily, and maybe I don't have all the various connections. So identifying the people who want to buy dozens, if not hundreds of my units at a time, that becomes my greatest challenge at this point. So, I mean, the challenges are different depending on where you're at. Some people's challenge might be, how do I sell 30 holsters at the next gun show? Or how do I make my holsters something unique and worth purchasing? How do I do something valuable with my holster such that it differentiates it from anything else other than just through the convenience of happening to be near the front door at the gun show, right? Like, there's a variety of challenges, like for me, the product differentiation hasn't always necessarily been the initial challenge. Sometimes it becomes a challenge if I'll make something and then it starts to maybe potentially get diluted by the number of other people who also kind of pick up on it. And so I made an attempt with the product revision to try and solve that, insofar as, I wanted to really take advantage of the maximum technical limitations of the process in order to make them less practical to copy. But anyone who's doing it this way with precision forming and CNC can jump into. Yep. I'm not saying you necessarily should, but
it's not magic.
It's not magic, and it's not impossible, but it's also not something that's easily done with a foam press, for example. So that was a solution that I wanted to work into it. But the sort of differentiation of the product hasn't necessarily always been the most difficult part. Now I've reached a point where, and for a while it was keeping up with demand was the most difficult part, and now it's fulfilling the capacity is the most difficult part. So, that's just a new thing that I'm going to have to learn. And if anybody maybe
Wants to be a dealer.
Or maybe be a dealer rep, you could get a commission, and our dealer prices are really good. You get like at least a 30% margin sometimes on some things. You get a really great margin on the flat pack. If you've got a gun store or a tactical supply store and you want to stock the flat pack, you should hit up flatpackcarrier.com or email Owen at snakehoundmachine.com, and he'll set you up with a dealer agreement. So, just putting that
Shameless
out there.
plug.
Shameless plug. I'm not, no shame in my
Not
game.
ashamed.
Anyway.
Maybe a little ashamed. Maybe just a little bit.
No.
No, I'm well,
I think I provide a very reasonable value, and I'm not ashamed to point that out.
I agree, but it's still it's been hard for me to learn to be confident about selling what I make, even if I'm thoroughly convinced of the quality of what I make.
Dude, you can't even take a compliment.
No, but it's like, it's not about the compliment. It's like it's coming to grips with the fact that on some level there's still an embarrassment about having the ego and the confidence to say, yes, I make a world-class product. It's audacious. Like, this is an audacious industry. We are a whole bunch of small shops who have started doing things and just going for it over and over and over and over. And 5 years ago, I think most of the big holster companies didn't take any of us seriously.
Nope.
And now they do. And it's not because, it's not because we talked a big game 5 years ago and finally got to a point where, like, we can start to back it up. But because, like, some days I walk into my shop and I look at the stuff I had in my shop. When I first brought John back from the airport and walked into the shop and I showed him around, sometimes I realize again how far I've come from where I was 4 or 5 years ago. It's easy to get sort of sucked into the moment of what I do now, how I work, what I got. I'll get to that quick Swift Press plug in a minute, Ben. But there is such a wealth of information, of equipment, of hardware, of suppliers, of social media interest. There's just an unbelievable wealth in our field right now that virtually nothing prevents a small but determined and intentional shop from producing a world-class product cost-effectively with short lead times and delivering it to customers who will be incredibly happy with it.
Quick Swift Press plug.
Quick Swift Press plug. So, I have Swift Press in stock. They're one of the products that I design and sell through my website. I am planning on putting a coupon up. It'll go live tonight and will run through Black Friday. So if you've been thinking about getting a Swift Press, now is the time to get a Swift Press.
If you're serious about making holsters and you want to make a lot of holsters in a small shop, get one.
Now, I know some guys have built their own small non-membrane formers. I sold a bunch of Swift Presses. I use a Swift Press. I have my big vacuum former for a lot of stuff. I still like using the Swift Press. What are we drinking? We are drinking.
I don't know what this is. He handed it to me.
This is 15th and College IPA. This is the House private label brand of Big Red here in Indiana.
But we were drinking Ice Lord yesterday, and
Ice Lord is the boss. Pint and a half can for $1.
The can was this big, and it was $1, which is exactly my speed. I don't drink fancy beers. I drink cheap beers because I keep it real.
If you don't have a Swift Press, you're doing it wrong. That's not necessarily true, Brent Fernandez. It depends what you're doing. But if you have a small stable of products you want to make very consistently, and you're willing to sacrifice some material for the sake of speed, and you want to be able to get plastic,
which is a great bet.
If you're a shop that's only selling 2 holsters a week, you don't need that capacity yet. If you need the capacity, do it. I like IPA, Chris. I'm not surprised you don't like it. You probably drink lemon shandy.
I'm not the biggest IPA fan. I always feel like I need, if somebody pours me an IPA in a glass. The first IPA I had, I sent it back twice because I thought the glass was still soapy. It's just my palate. I don't like hipster beer.
Okay. So, For what it is, the Swift Press is a very straightforward, robust, plug-and-play, non-membrane, adjustable vacuum forming solution. I believe it offers a great value. The coupon code will be live on my Instagram page tonight. Check it out. It'll run through Black Friday. I think I've got 15 or 18 presses left in stock. Once they're gone, I'm not making another batch until 2017. So if you want one, get one soon. We'll be shooting also some Swift Press demos early next week, some video of unboxing one, setting it up, hooking it up to your pump, what's included when you buy one, and a couple of quick forming demos because I've not been able to make the time to shoot all the video I want myself of my stuff in my shop.
That's what I'm here for. I'm here
That's
to help.
part of what he's here for.
We're here to
Cameraman. I don't need the capacity, but it's fun to, yeah. Well, you know, like John said, right now he's got more horsepower, more capacity than he has sales for yet, which frees him up to go out and make the sales. If you're always in a condition of your orders exceeding your capacity, you're basically treading water with your head barely above or occasionally under. When you get to a point where you've invested in advance in capacity and you know you can make more than you can exceed your current demand, that's incredibly freeing. So much of the stress of the deadlines, the lead times, the shipping and fulfillment is
it's
alleviated. It's
totally
totally
kind of
gone when you know that there's more available and you can put the pedal down and you can speed up the production and get more done.
Or, you know, it's a different kind of pressure. When you have the inventory, you want to get the volume out there. But then again, you can advertise as having no lead time. When you sign up a dealer, you can fulfill their order immediately. I mean, it's easier to close a sale when a dealer says, "What's the lead time?" and you say, "Tomorrow."
It's in my car.
Right.
It's right here.
Right, or it's in stock. It's as fast as we can ship it to you. So it's a different kind of pressure. You do have inventory that's burning a hole in your pocket to get out there.
Right.
But at the same time, it gives you a flexibility that never existed with a backlog. I mean,
how many of you have ever dreaded getting the flu when you had a backlog? You're like, it's like watching a YouTube video on dial-up, and you're like, your playback is just like almost catching up to your buffering. You're like, uh oh. You know, if you're barely keeping up with lead times and you get sick, or somebody in your family gets sick, or some unfortunate incident happens in your life and you're offline for 2 weeks, what happens? A train wreck happens.
Yeah, and it's incredibly frustrating to have that backlog all the time. Like you can't take any time off. You can't develop anything new. Like, I spent 2 years not developing a new product. I ran on the old Access and the old Skeleton for 2 years, just trying to get that process efficient enough that I could get ahead. And I spent all of that time trying to get caught up without developing anything new. That stagnation is intolerable. And what I did at the beginning of this year is that I stopped taking new orders and I discontinued everything.
Global reset. Punch the big red button.
I nuked it to get here. And that was like the most liberating thing I've ever done. How many hours a day do I work now? Well,
depends if I'm driving the slave hard or not.
Well, honestly, after this week, the number of units that I'm going to have in stock at my own shop that could potentially become holsters at any given second is going to be enormous. And the number of whole units that are in stock with Owen, my distributor, is so significant that if I didn't want to take advantage of the excess parts that I currently have as a result of the week that I've spent with Andrew, I could do nothing if I felt like it. I don't actually have to make a holster for a week. I could take a week off. I could fart around and play video games. I could...
And still be ahead of the game
and
when
still
he comes
be ahead
back.
of the game. I could do nothing but harass people and sign them up to be dealers. I I could sit down for the entire next week and do nothing but make units for my custom shop, right? That's a liberating thing. Now I actually get to make holsters for fun again. Like, I spent years not having fun doing this because it was just a grind, and I got to make more holsters, and I got to get caught up, and this person's complaining, and I got to answer this email, and I got to just slit my throat every day. But now that I've got an inventory, now that I've got the capacity, I can run a custom shop where I make fun, unique holsters that I want to make.
What's coming up next in the custom shop that we already made this week?
What's coming up next in the custom shop, and also, hopefully, I think Overwatch Precision, our other dealer, is going to stock them, are they're going to have the inventory of special edition gray skeletons and magazine carriers, like a nice steel gray, and I'm going to stock a few overruns, whichever they don't stock in their inventory, I'm going to have in my custom shop. And we're also designing a codified new mold for the PHLster Classic, which I've been working with using the DIY moth molds in the Swift press, and we're working on just a single shot, single mold, CNC'd, specifically made.
So the moth mold contains the base geometry you want, but in order to make your classic holster, you had to add it and mod it and put some things on it.
Right.
So we're looking at a 17 length,
ergonomic,
with an integrated grip tuck feature, with full rear sight coverage, a full sweat guard. It's not an access, but it's a very streamlined, simple, functional inside the waistband holster for a full size pistol.
Which I can, which I'll have the satisfaction of using a custom CNC mold every time I made it, rather than take a split mold and try and mock it up and either tape it together or accidentally ruin it and have to remock it every time I want to do something. And I get to get back into the joy of actualizing the creative ideas that I have in my head and shipping them to people and making a couple handmade holsters. Like, once everything's in stock, I can sit down, I can wake up, I can sleep in a little bit, have breakfast, go to my workshop, hang out with my dogs, make a couple holsters, put them in the custom shop, and make, $150 in an afternoon just for pocket money. That's incredible. And that was just unheard of a couple years ago. And that's the power of collaboration, right? Do not sleep on it. Don't think that you're going to do it all yourself, or that there's, the only way to do this is to, man up and bootstrap it all into your own shop. Don't be ridiculous. We're talking about the good life here. Yeah, you could have it all under your own roof and be your own empire, but you also buy all the headaches that come with that.
One other thing that I wanted to mention, since we're talking about the moth molds and custom CNC molds, when I talk to people who email me or call me or text me or send me a DM on Instagram with questions about custom molds, one of the questions I think is behind their initial questions is just a sort of a feeling that they're uncertain about the value prop of custom CNC molds. And there are two things I want to point out about why we're doing the PHLster Classic as a new CNC mold. First of all, it's numerically verifiable. We can actually tweak it and adjust it very exactly, like an integrated grip tuck feature. Well, what do you want it to look like? How do you want it to be shaped? How tall do you want it to be? How far off the side of the holster do you want it to stand? All those details you can mock up, but when we do it in CAD and you machine a mold, it's exact, it's repeatable, it's verifiable, and it can be changed in an incremental and quantifiable way. And then when it's dialed in the way you want, I can make him as many copies of that mold as he needs. He doesn't have to have just one. He can have a dozen. He can cycle them through his vacuum former as fast as he can possibly go and have plenty of time to cool them off in between. So if you have a holster design that you make in volume and you need to be able to produce it quickly, getting a custom CNC mold made and then getting duplicates cut just totally unlocks you to run those as fast as possible.
And if you have an idea for something which is unique and something which your design requires, you can do things with CNC which are not possible with stock split molds. if your design requirements exceed what's possible with your split mold,
Get a custom mold
get a
made.
custom mold. And I'm talking about like if you've done some sort of tape down or nail down mock up on your split mold, and you have to fix it frequently or realign it frequently, or it gets bent or warped or it wears. I mean, like when you do a
Vacuum forming is hard on molds.
when you do a tape up mock up on a mold, it wears, it warps, it changes, it shifts. I mean, like, how many times have you sat there with something where you've taped it all up, and after 10 units, you gotta strip it all off and do it again? What a nightmare! And then
Or
it's
you
never
demold after the first one, and you go pop, and it pops out, and you're like,
all the
"Where's
tapes-
my blocking?"
and it's all
and you look, and it's
stuck in
inside the
mold.
shell.
What a nightmare! That, like, I had got so sick of working like that. I'm like, I'm a professional. Look at all these other products which I make, which look like real, precise, aesthetic things, and I'm going to torture myself with the tape up.
Don't.
It's not even like there was a while where I just like didn't do a lot of stuff because I knew that I was going to make it by hand, and it wasn't. The other products were so representative of what was possible and what I thought a good holster should be.
That anything less was just going to be unsatisfying.
Like, yeah, I could do a tape up one off, but it wasn't going to look enough like what I thought the standard of quality should be. And so I was just like, then it won't get made. Like, then I won't make that money. I would rather not spend my time on something that I'm not as a, like, when I open a box of skeleton holster parts, I am ecstatic, and I've made, I don't know how many thousands I've made this year, but I'm happy with them every single time. Like, I'm ecstatic. Like, when I open the box, I'm like, I still can't believe that I'm here. Like, I can't believe that I've arrived at this point, and I'm so happy to be here that when I turn around, I'm like, oh, well, I'll do a tape-up job on this holster.
Gag me.
It's just not worth it. I'm like, I'd rather just not do anything. You know, I'll go out for lunch.
I'd rather make a couple of phone calls and try to enlist a dealer or two than spend an hour taping up and messing around with a one-off. It's just, you know, it's not worth it for me. It's not worth it for John. But we're also in a position that a lot of small shops are not currently in yet. And you can set goals. Like, we don't collaborate for the sake of collaboration as a thing in itself. Okay? Both John and I had goals for our businesses, and the collaboration mutually served our goals. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention about it, which was earlier we talked about honesty and being upfront about your intentions and what you plan when you collaborate or you sort of apprentice or learn from somebody. Collaboration is about giving the best of what you bring to the table. It is not about extracting the maximum value out of the person you're collaborating with. That's predatory or parasitic. Okay?
Or exploitive.
Exploitative. You know, if you collaborate, you are giving the best of what you have. Like, it would be stupid for us to collaborate on a new product that I designed, John produced, and I went out and tried to find dealers for. I mean, that's just like, that's totally against the grain of everything our shops are set up to do and our businesses are currently organized around. I'm a production shop. Like, you know, double down on your strengths. Really go all in on those. But when you collaborate, you know, I consistently try to make decisions that involve giving additional value to my mold clients beyond what I'm contractually obligated to give them when they buy a mold from me. I know that if I give them more value, that that extra bits, you know, say I sent off, I had a customer who recently had a decent sized order come in. He had a CNC mold that was in production. It was verified. I didn't have a final copy to him yet, but he had some volume coming in. He needed to make a bunch of stuff. I just made him 4 or 5 extra HDPE molds, fully set up, vacuum drilled, got them all ready, and just sent them off, no charge. Just like, here, just take these, run with them. Because I know that if his business is able to hit that sale on time and the customer is satisfied, that means more business, more upside for him. And it's not guaranteed, but that means the potential of more upside for me. It's not a purely selfish thing. I want business, of course, but I also want his business to succeed. My job, largely these days, is enabling other shops to overcome their problems and succeed in ways they didn't think they could before, to solve production problems that had just crippled them up till now.
Given that goal, and given that I know that that's Andrew's goal, I make it a point that at every opportunity that I have where I know a lot of holster makers, and I'm in touch with a lot of them, and they email me and they ask me for help and they visit me, and I happen to be in that position, and at every opportunity that I can, having had the experience that I've had, and being like the most enthusiastic convert, I funnel as many people towards Andrew as I can. Like, are you having a problem? Let's talk to Andrew about it. Do you need a process solution? Let's talk to Andrew about it. Do you need advice on how to go forward? Let's talk to Andrew about it. And the more business that I give him, the more new cool toys he can buy for his shop, and then the more new cool
5-axis
things are
robots
available to me.
Open my beers.
Right? Like, if I can encourage people to spend their money with Andrew and invest in his business, then my capability grows as well. And also, my friend who does a lot of hard work and who deserves to get paid for it gets paid for it. And then when, maybe after some period of time where I've given him some number of customers, he's happier to deal with me because I know I butter his bread. That's true. I mean, I like him and I want him to get paid, and also it also increases the currency that I have with him.
It's possible for it to be a net gain for every party involved.
Right.
More clients for me allows me to offer better options and better turnaround times and capacity to John. But, raising the bar, improving the quality in the industry benefits all of us. I know tons of holster makers are consistently frustrated with the low level of information and knowledge and education among holster clients. It's a topic of constant discussion on the Facebook Codex forums, on Codex Pro, in my DMs and texts. There are many shops out there that produce a poor quality product, and consumers can't seem to tell the difference.
Right, you look at the comments on something that's like dangerous and obviously poorly executed, and people are like, "Oh, that looks great,"
or it was only $30, and you're like, "Well, we all stand to benefit across the board. If you're here watching this feed, I would bet money that you're not in that bottom tier of irresponsible holster makers who make unsafe garbage." The fact that you pay attention to John and that you watch my Facebook Live feed means, to me, you are interested in upping your game and improving your product. What?
Do you make a holster for a 9mm? Yeah, you got a high point?
We all stand to benefit from the bar being raised industry-wide. If that's going to hurt you, if the bar being raised will put you out of business,
see ya.
It's been fun. That's it. Like, the market decides. If your product is good, doesn't matter how good your marketing is. If your product is garbage, it's garbage. It's just bad. Marketing doesn't fix products. But
it does if you're VersaCarry.
I'm going to get a migraine.
You're going to get a lawsuit.
He said it.
It's satire.
Yeah, no, totally,
fair use satire,
totally in fun. And Ben Miller asked how I came to the decision of making parts for other holster makers. So, Ben, it was a fairly simple decision for me. I had clear goals for my business in terms of the quality and speed with which I wanted to be able to execute custom designs and develop products In order to do that, I needed a certain base level of equipment to be able to execute that consistently and quickly. I bought my first CNC. It was a small 2x2 router. It would make molds. It would trim parts. It wouldn't do any of that especially quickly and not with exceptionally high quality. It was a starter machine. It got me through the door. It got me learning. It was indispensable. I could not have gotten where I am without it, but I quickly outgrew that machine. And then once I made the investment, you usually have quality and volume of capacity as values that go along with each other when you invest in a high quality machine. I was able to get into a CNC mill, my brother Speedio, that offered me everything I wanted and more in terms of speed and quality when it came to machining individual things. But it was also so fast that I had tons of machine time available. Like, I'm one guy. I can only use so many holster molds at a time. Like, if I made myself 400 molds, 396 of them at a time would be sitting around. And so I realized that I had all this horsepower, and the best way for me to capitalize on the new capacity I invested in was to share it around, to start doing job work. So I do work in a number of industries, a number of fields outside holster work. Derek asked if we're going to SHOT.
Yeah, we are. And we'll be there with Owen from Snakehound as well. We're going to press the flesh and catch the flu.
I don't think it's the. I think if you get the flu, you've probably done well. I think it was catch the plague.
It's the super flu.
The bubonic shot plague.
Yeah, whatever antibiotic and antiviral resistant plague that's going to wipe out humanity is going to happen at SHOT Show.
Epicenter.
Yeah, that's patient zero.
Derek, yeah, we can do a meetup. We're definitely going to be at SHOT. There are a number of holster makers, but not Clark because he's lame, who are going to be at SHOT. And yeah, we should totally meet up. You know, that would be super fun. I know a lot of guys' names. I've talked to a lot of guys on the phone. I have met very few other holster makers in person.
Yeah,
I'd love to meet you guys.
Got to put those names to germs.
Yeah, Keith, definitely not having a booth. No booth at SHOT. No. I want to walk around and wear an Airsoft branded shirt and just be that guy. You know. We should get together at a buffet. Yeah, Matt, we should. We're going to do probably, hopefully, 2 more Facebook Live broadcasts before this guy heads back to Philadelphia and gets back to the life of cheesesteak and traffic. Can the ammo guy join you? Sure. Bring me a free case of that nice 77 grain open tip match, and we'll call it even. I'll buy you dinner, Sam. So we're going to sign off for now. I will have the Swift Press coupon live on my site later tonight. It will run through Black Friday. If you've been thinking about grabbing one, now is the time. This is the last batch for 2016. John and I are working on some really cool stuff this week. In addition to producing a lot of his inventory items, we've been brainstorming, dreaming out loud, prototyping stuff. I hope that stuff we ordered comes in tomorrow. That would be totally sweet.
So cool. It'll be here Monday no matter what.
Yeah, for sure, by Monday. And so keep an eye. Anytime we're going to do a Facebook Live broadcast, we'll be posting on his Instagram and mine and on Facebook. And also this past week, which was finally a thing I got over the hump and did, I have an email sign up on my website, henryholsters.com. It's on the landing page in the top bar. I would love it if you would sign up. I'll be using it to put out some short written articles about process, about design, about equipment. I want to use that to provide as much value as I can to you about holster making. I would really appreciate it if you would sign up, and thank you to all of you who already have. So go to henryholsters.com, drop your email in there. I'm not selling the list. I'm not going to spam you. I'm going to provide as much value as I possibly can. I appreciate your time and attention. It's been totally fun having this guy out of my shop. I hope that we'll be able to get a couple more videos out to you and answer some more of your questions. Between now and next week, if you have any questions that you want to have us answer, post them up on John's Instagram page.
Yep.
And we will check it consistently and make sure to get to those in the next Facebook Live videos. So thank you for stopping by. Have a great Friday night. Until next time, carry safe.
Thanks for joining us, guys.